It took me 15 years to get the print rights back to them. And they basically weren't doing anything with them. They were just sitting there, and I would ask periodically and ask and ask and ask. And finally they gave them back. Meanwhile, they're making, $10 on those books. And on the other hand, I'm making much, much more on on the books that I'm promoting. And, and so eventually they had to give them back, but that is not, how I wanted to model OHB.
You're listening to Writer Unblocked, a podcast for aspiring and experienced authors. I'm your host and author coach, Nicole, and on this show, we chat with up-and-coming as well as best-selling authors, literary agents, and publishing professionals to inspire you and keep the vibe high. Today on Writer Unblocked, I'm chatting with author and publisher Tanya Anne Crosby. So Tanya Anne is a New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of 30 novels, and she's been featured in People, Romantic Times, Publishers Weekly, plus her books have been translated to over 8 languages. All of that, and then after spending years in the traditional publishing space, she not only went indie, but she started her own publishing company, Heber Books. And she continues to be a trailblazer and inspiration in this community. I just want you to know that I have been a big, big fan of hers for a very long time. So this is a very special episode for me. As usual, I will put additional information and resources for you in the show notes. Okay, let's dive in. So, Tanya Anne Crosby, welcome to Writer Unblocked, and thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me today.
You're absolutely welcome. Thank you for having me. And Nicole, I will talk to you anytime, anywhere. So
I was so nervous about asking you. I know we've obviously worked together in the Audible/ACX days, but I was like, will she agree? Will she agree to do something? She's a very busy lady. So
always for you. Always, always.
Oh, Tanya. So I am fangirling, just like that's for the first time we met. I think it was at NINC, right? Novelist Inc. And just to give people a little context about how we met, I had been a fan of yours many years prior into even getting into the publishing industry myself. And I had always carried around this tattered paperback of yours called Viking's Prize. And one day we were getting ready to go to NINC. We were launching ACX, which is the self-publishing arm at Audible. And I saw your name in the list of people attending the conference, and I freaked out. My marketing manager's like, "What's going on? What's wrong?" And I said, "Tanya Anne Crosby is going to be there. You don't understand." And then I brought this paperback into work, and they're all laughing at me like, "What? And I said, "Yes, this is the best book ever written." So we met at NINC, and I'm so careful with it because I've read it so many times it's starting to fall apart. But obviously, you signed it for me, and I treasure it with all my heart.
And it's old now. I mean, you can mention that too. I'm old, and it's old. It's been around a long time. That was actually, I think, my 3rd book. And did you know that book actually was like the? It's funny because it was like the question in one of in some like game show, and they were showing it against something else that was not a book. It was just like, and they were asking, what do you think sold better? And it was Viking's Prize. So,
it's Viking's Prize. So I fully enamored with this book. I reread it all the time. I actually think I need to get the digital version so I stop causing more damage to this one. But first of all, if you're listening and you don't know, Tanya Anne Crosby is, best-selling with a capital B. You've had a long, incredible career, over, I believe, 40 books.
Yes.
8 languages or more at this point. Who knows?
Yeah. So every time if somebody, through all these years, I've been asked that question a million times. Like I can't even tell you, and I still can't tell you exactly how many. I know it's over 40.
Okay.
And I know it's over 8 or 6, over 6, and probably 8. Maybe 9. I don't know.
But that's a good problem to have. I love that. I love that so much. So you've been in the publishing industry. And one thing that I always love about your story is that you started off as a traditional published author, and then you went indie. And then in about 2011, you started your own publishing company.
Correct.
And that's Heber Books.
Yep. Absolutely.
So we're going to get to talk about that today because I am just fascinated by that kind of journey. and not just the reverse journey of people typically being indie and then trying to pursue the traditional route, but also just again like I'm gonna start my own publishing company, which I've heard other interviews about how this came about. It wasn't like you woke up one day and you're like, I'm gonna build this company. It was more like you were helping a friend,
Mhm.
and one turned into over 100 authors now
Yep.
being published by OHB, which is amazing.
So where do you want me to start?
Okay, so let's go back to Vikings Prize, because before we start to talk about the business of you, one question I had for you that I didn't get to ask you while we were working together years ago is, I remember you would email me and you would say, Nicole, I'm attaching a new cover art for such and such book. Can you please have them swap it? And sometimes it would be ACX books, and sometimes it would be your Audible Studios, traditionally audio published books.
Yes.
I never got to ask you. First of all, I thought it was so smart. Back then, not many authors were doing the cover testing, either because they weren't thinking of it or because of maybe the cost of it was too much for them. But I never got to ask you, what did you learn from updating the covers? Because even now when I go to Kindle, my McKinnon's Bride has a different cover than the current cover. And I haven't even looked. I think Vikings Price has got also through some cover. So talk to me about this. How do I educate authors about how important this tactic is, and like what it actually yields when you take the time to do that?
So, it's there are several schools of thought, and there's a fine line between, you know, doing it too much and not doing it enough. The thing is, one of the things that I actually love about the indie path in general is just that we have more control. This is one of the reasons why when I came back from my 10-year hiatus, and instead of going back to, I did actually go back temporarily to traditional publishing, but I didn't stay there long for lots of reasons. But, I like the control, and I think it's a really important, so first of all, they say people need to see your cover at least 3 times before, it's recognized, and before, it's a thing in their minds. And, but at some point it also becomes invisible. Like that
Mm.
cover becomes like, they see a million different covers, and they've seen yours 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 20. And at some point it's kind of like when you're editing also, you're looking over your own work, and you could have a slew of misspellings in there. And at some point you have to give it over to somebody else so that they can, because you become blind to some of those things. And I think that our covers, readers get cover blindness. But beyond that, as an indie, so that was one reason. And then the second reason is that as indie authors, and I learned this when I was at Match.com. A lot of times when we did user testing, the things that people said they wanted were not the things that they actually wanted. And, what they might say, they want this and this and this feature, but they won't use it. And they're going to use this other feature that they never even mentioned. People don't always know what they want until you show them. And so a lot of times, in early on in my career, I asked, I was kind of just following the trends, and I asked my readers, what do you want? And very honestly, some of those early covers just did not convert. And so what I had to do, and then, as time went on, more things came into the mix. Like, for example, Amazon has certain criteria for their covers before they'll advertise. Some of the covers just became, they might be gorgeous, but then you have a nipple in there.
Oh, we have to talk about this whole, yeah, there were so many bare chests at one point during like 2000, I want to say 2015 maybe, because I was still working on ACX, and there were so many bare chested men on the cover.
I know, right? And so actually, and speaking of nipples, actually on Vikings Prize, I'm not sure. I think that there might be 3 on that one. If it's not, there might be either that cover. That's the cover that Avon did, but I think there might either be 3 nipples or 3 arms. I can't remember. One of my
Oh,
books had 3 nipples, and the other one had like 3 arms. And it's hard to see, it's hard to spot, but I'm pretty sure that it's the nipples. I think there are
this
like 3 on them.
such an
Um,
Easter egg.
it is. It absolutely is. But
Is
anyway,
this
so
is this Fabio, by the way?
I
He's Fabio-esque.
yes, I don't think it was. I think it was, yeah. But I have actually met Fabio. Yeah. So cover art testing was, just imperative. And so between all of those things, you have that, as an indie, you have the control to be able to test those covers and to, if this one isn't working, do another one, but at some point it does become too much. So you have to actually kind of know when something's working, when it's not working, and just kind of leave it alone. And early on, I also have the ability to, I have a, long history with Photoshop. So early on, I was able to do a lot of the covers myself. I don't do any of that anymore. So it was not a difficult thing for me to test it, but also at the same time, I one of the reasons why I don't do covers anymore, like not for myself or anyone else, because I actually was secretly selling them like on the sly. I would send them to Period Images and let them sell them without, under an assumed name, just because I would just do those when I was plotting or if I was like had downtime or whatever. And I wouldn't know what to do with them. And yeah, I didn't care if I ever made anything on them, but I would just like send them because somebody should be able to use them.
So
But
you just mock up, you just make cover
um,
art.
yeah,
That's it. That's
my just kind of, when I don't have the time to do that anymore, not for myself or anyone else. But even if I did, I wouldn't do it for a couple reasons. One, I like giving the work to human beings. And second, I also, when I do the art myself, I am never finished. Like I will tweak everything. And then you start out with this amazing cover and it all works, and then the more you tweak it becomes, the more Frankenstein it becomes. And so,
and that's how you end up with three arms
well,
or three
I
nipples.
didn't do that one.
No, no, I know, I know.
Yeah, yes, that is how you end up with 3 arms. Or, more likely just, head's too big or just whatever. It's just, you tweak too much and it just becomes not, not real or yeah. So anyway, so I don't really, but that's how that came about.
I also think a lot about the evolution of the cover art because in my time working deeply in the romance genre, and my last role at Audible was actually programming the romance slate.
Mhm.
And, I saw this sort of start, these like the Vikings prize covers were, back in the day. And then I saw them sort of transform into almost like what I call like the paranormal covers, which again, a lot of bare chests and a lot of, couples on the cover from stock images, like photo, not painted like the old school
Right.
ones. And then I saw them sort of evolve again into illustrated, like very cutesy, very, very demure. No, I'm kidding. Very cutesy, very, very colorful. And I'm sort of seeing it change again. Like when I look at the Cornish Princess series, that cover art is gorgeous.
That's
That is a
illustrated.
style. Oh,
Yeah, that's illustrated, and that is I'm going to butcher her name, and I'm so sorry, Drzenka, but her name is Drzenka Kimball, and she's Creative Dust is her company, and she does a lot of our book covers for OHB as well. But I found her work originally for the Cornish Princess. I had another cover on the Cornish Princess, and it was just beautiful. But the artist that I was working with at the time, Raven, who I love, I adore her, she couldn't really finish the series because she had just too much on her plate. And so I needed to finish it in a way that, I mean, she did give me all the assets so I could do it myself, but very honestly, I really wanted something very special for the Cornish Princess and for the series as a whole. And so I went to Drzenka, and yeah, it's illustrated, it's unique. I know nobody else has it, that cover art, and if they do, it's absolutely stolen because it was done specifically for the Cornish Princess.
it's gorgeous. It's
Thank you.
absolutely gorgeous. But it's almost like every couple years I go look for your books. I'm like, she changed that cover.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit of okay. So when I think I'm a very data driven person. So I'm always like, okay, if I'm gonna for example, have you ever A/B tested? So have you both covers out, two versions of the cover out at the same time and measured a little bit what's going on there?
I have. It's difficult to do because obviously Amazon doesn't want you to have 2 versions up. So it's kind of difficult to do in a way that is a true A/B test. So, but you can, the things that you can do prior to publishing, do polls and that sort of thing, you could, but again, we go back to, the things that I learned when I was at Match.com. A lot of times the things that people say they want aren't the things they want, so just, you kind of almost have to just put it out there and test it. But it is very difficult to do a true A/B test with
Yeah. No,
cover.
that makes sense. But I love all your covers. I love all the iterations. I like I said, I am fascinated by just in the romance genre alone, the evolution of the cover. I'm like waiting to see what's next because it's like if I mapped it in a slideshow, right? And I looked at like by decade, for example, I could, or even by subgenre, I could see a story come alive in terms of how the visuals have changed over the years and how they've changed in correlation to how the genre itself has exploded, right? And so it's true. You see the cover art, that's what you're drawn to, and that's what you go for. And I didn't realize when you mentioned cover blindness, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, they just, just they might love a cover, but it's just at some point, the eye just it becomes invisible to the eye because there's this new shiny new object that comes along, and suddenly the old cover is, no longer. And some of the things that I've done, is switched covers temporarily and then gone back to the old one because I found that the old one actually converts better. But after you have changed it for a little while, the old becomes new again, and it sort of gives it a bit of a refresh. But in general, I'm not really doing a lot of that kind of stuff right now. I will. My authors will tell you that I actually, not just for my own books, but for theirs as well. With when something's not working, I think that is one of the things as an indie author and publisher, that is, or I guess I don't know if I what you would call my publishing company. We'll talk about that in a little bit, because I don't really know that I would call it indie, but at the same time. Anyway, so we have the ability to change those covers, as long as budget allows. And so I think we would be remiss in not, accepting that could be a factor in why a book is not selling. Could be the blurbs, could be the, if you're putting money behind something and it's still not moving, you know, the read through sort of indicates whether or not they like the first book, but whether they actually download that first book has everything to do with the cover or the blurb.
Oh,
So if they're
interesting.
not doing that, then you have to really look at what's not working, where the cover is concerned and where the blurb is concerned.
So this is incredible because I think the takeaway is you don't just publish a book and it's out there and then you're done and you're moving on to the next book. As an author who treats this as a business, just of your own books, that that book is forever work because you may be updating the cover, you may be updating the blurb, you're paying attention to trends, you're seeing if there's an opportunity to resurface that particular title or series. So it's the takeaway here is you don't just publish your book and
Mhm.
forget about your baby. It is,
Mm-mm.
and you have a lot of babies. So
I do. But the thing is, I think that's actually what started, that was the concept behind OHB in the first place, was that, so this is not to denigrate anything about traditional publishing. I came from traditional publishing. I love my experience there, and I learned a lot. Loved my editors. But very often, because they are like the Titanic, it's very difficult for them to move on a dime or stop on a dime, So a lot of times, there's a lot of red tape that comes along with changing a cover or whatever else. But, and they're usually thinking in terms of, that 5-week shelf life. Ex- in- Instead of actually looking at that backlist as forever income. And so that's where OHB started. Is, I had a lot of backlist, and I was able to keep it very relevant. And when I started OHB, I don't really recruit. I did initially. When I first put all the things together, as you said, I did start the company to help a friend, and
which I love that, by the way. I love that backstory.
so, I the short version of that is when her husband, Pamela Morrissey is one of my dearest friends, and when her husband passed away, I was already really doing a lot of this stuff for her books anyway, but I couldn't really put the money behind it because they weren't my books, and I didn't, So when her husband passed away, I asked her what I could do to help, and she said, "Well, just take my books, take them all and treat them like they're your own. And then you give me whatever you think you need to give me. And so much trust in that. But so, so at first I said no. And then I talked to my husband and only because, the whole doing it all for free was one thing, but then doing it as a business arrangement was, with a friend was just kind of weird. But if I were going to do this with anyone, it would have been for Pam. So I went ahead and put all the legal things in place. And once everything was in place, I started noticing people here and there who I felt like their backlist needed a little bit of love. And so I reached out maybe the first, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, and literally OHB grew from that. Like within 2 years, we had over 100 authors. It was because those authors went to their friends and said, hey, you need to. But we started as a means to keep that backlist relevant.
So when you say we, you mean you and your husband, like, or
Nobody
did you hire?
have a whole lot to do with it. No,
No?
I mean, I have a full staff now. So anybody who thinks that, I'm doing all of this on my own, no way. I have a full staff who are all extremely capable and talented people. So I've got a staff of editorial people. I've got marketing staff. I've got, we're pretty buttoned up at this point. We've got social media people. We've got like the whole works. So
That's the dream. But it wasn't that in the beginning, right?
no.
Because it was just you doing it for
Yeah.
Pam. So how did oh my God, this is so daunting to think about. So you got some legal paperwork in place.
Mhm.
That sounds easy enough in terms of being like it's for one, like just for her work. So you were like, these are the legal parameters and this is gonna be my cut and this is what we're gonna do. And
Right.
you're gonna actually sign it over to me.
Right. But it's even more complicated than that, actually, because you have to get the things I learned, in order to actually behave as a publisher, you've got to get insurance. You've got to get all of these. There are so many aspects of doing it, but then once I did it and paid for it, it seemed really a waste of money to just do it for just one person. So, especially when so many other people I felt needed it. So, and I have made a commitment that I won't. At first, it was that I wouldn't actually bring on more people than I could actually manage. And now we have a full staff, and I have lots of help. And so I still have that commitment, but in terms of the company itself, like I won't actually take on more authors than my staff can actually
Right.
handle. And the other piece to that, because I am actually the person who looks at the marketing over the high level marketing. So I won't bring on more people than I can actually manage in terms of that also.
So you're the CEO. I mean, you're operating as you're the CEO. So you're operating as the
Yeah.
CEO of the company. But you also mentioned you're a control freak. So how do you so for example, I'm a one-woman show. I mean, I have a producer slash editor, and I've had social media help here and there when I need it. But one of the things that scares me to grow my own business is letting other people at some point you can't touch everything.
No, you can't. And that's if you are a perfectionist and you are that makes it really, really difficult because you do need to trust people. And I will tell you, initially it was difficult. Like the first person I ever hired, I actually told it was Kate. And if if she ends up watching this, she'll probably like giggle about this. But Kate, I told Kate, I said, I'm going to hire you because she came to me from, recommended by another author. And I hired her and I said, I don't know how much work I can give you. I'm pretty much doing everything. I can guarantee you this many small number of hours and we'll just grow from there. And if you're willing to do that, we'll just kind of grow together. And honestly, it was a process. I had to slowly pry things out of my grasp and give it to other people. But it's easier when you have people who also care and who are committed and who are more than capable. And my staff, all of them, have shown me that. And not only have they shown me that they are capable and caring and want to do this work, but they also care about me and can see when I'm overworked. And they scold me often, telling me you need to let go of things. Let me do it for you, and sometimes I listen and sometimes I don't, but it's not easy.
So for example, you don't review every submission because that would be
No,
impossible.
no. Mm.
But
Yeah.
at one point, as things are bubbling to the top, do you have like the final say in, so to speak, like who you're going to take on?
So I trust my editorial staff. When they tell me that they really like something, I'll go with it. Like, I'm not going to review it. I'm going to try. I have to trust them.
I like
That
that.
said, if they, bubble something up to the top that I don't feel like, I think it's too niche, or too, like, I can't really, it's a standalone title, or, which I'm not as apt to take, just because they're more difficult to promote. Or if it's a standalone title, or, there are a lot of other factors that I'm looking at when that submission bubbles up to me, and I'm looking at all those things, and I am the final decision as to, whether or not we bring somebody aboard. And I also have to keep in mind that, the staff is, only so big. So I need to make sure that we're not overcommitted either. So there are a lot of decisions that go into every submission, but I do trust my staff. When they tell me that they like something, I will go ahead and, more and more I trust them, because they have just proven themselves to me.
Right.
They know what they're doing, and, they love books, and they're not just people doing a job. They care about OHB.
That's fantastic. Now, this is interesting. You said the standalone, and I absolutely understand why, because when I was running the program for ACX to get more authors into audio, we targeted authors with the series. Like we just would not extend the particular program I was running within the program unless it was a series. But I always hear, you don't pitch an agent a series. You don't pitch a
Mhm,
series. You pitch one book. And it's funny here because it's like it's actually behooves you to have a series.
mhm.
They are easier to promote and they have like a longer lifespan. So it's sort of yet another of millions examples of the difference in in the giant industry, and when you're going the agent route versus you're
Right.
going either indie or going to a smaller publisher.
So I can't speak to, I've been in plenty of editorial meetings with my own books and with my editors back in my trad days and whatever, but I can't pretend to have any knowledge of what they're thinking of in terms of, their catalog as a whole. But I do think that traditional publishing does have that sort of history, and maybe are a little slow to change. So agents maybe are also kind of a little slow to change. But in terms of what we're doing, so one of the things that we no longer we actually have, as far as our company is concerned, we have two different programs. There's the core program, which has entirely different terms than the new books program. The core program is now closed, and it is invitation only, and it is, it has, I designed it so that authors benefited to, the utmost degree through that program. I can't really extend that to an author we're mentoring and having to, for example, do dub edits for their work, which sometimes can cost in excess of $3,000. And, there's a huge investment in a new author. I learned at one point that, for authors that I had, who some of the veteran authors who were not writing new works, it cost me 3 times more money to actually promote their books because they were not engaged with their audience. And similarly, it's the same with the standalones. The standalone titles cost me a lot more money to promote and bring in less, because they just do. I wish they didn't, but they do. Unless we're talking about, a standalone, for an author who just, will hit the list at, in the top five, and they're just, guaranteed to do that. That is a different thing entirely. That's a different animal. But, most books don't live there. They live somewhere else on the list. And it's just really difficult to put money behind a standalone. And that's the other piece of this, is that anybody that comes aboard, we are committed to, leave no child behind things. For us, this leave no book behind, or leave no author behind. Like, I won't bring authors aboard, and I won't keep their books if we're not promoting them.
Right.
So for me, the goal is to put, high ad spend behind the titles, and I cannot do that for a standalone, because we won't bring in, the it just won't have a good ROI. You can spend you can spend $10,000 on an ad for a book, and on paper, for example, like if we were, if but anyway, so like if we're spending $10,000 on, an Amazon ad, for example,
Right.
on paper, it doesn't, like, you might spend $10,000, and on paper it looks like you only brought in like 600. But then when you add the page reads to it, and we're talking about page reads for the entire series, it really just kind of makes an entirely different picture, and, prognosis for the earnings of that title projection. But you can't really do that for a standalone, because, it really is, you've just got that one single book has to actually bear the burden of earning back every dollar you put into it, and it's just more difficult. So we're just not really on board with standalones for the most part. I'm really not. So
No, that makes sense. That makes total sense because yeah, you're pouring into it. And so it's a lot easier to, sometimes even, people use book one as a loss leader, and then like people are buying book two and three. Again, we use that tactic a lot back in the ACX program, which is we would target people with a nice series. We would fund book one in audio, and then sure enough, they would come for book two, book three, book four, and then at that point the author would do it themselves. So
right.
it's a very smart tactic. Gosh, I just have so many questions about I mean, one book has so many formats.
Hmm.
And is it that you at the outset exploit every format for every author at OHB, or is it that you start with one? I mean, not, is it that all books lend themselves to audio? Like,
Not
how do you,
necessarily, no. So we do, like I said, we actually are no longer doing this core program, but the core program is actually very, very author centric, tailored to the author's needs. Pushing that aside, the new books program, we do ask for all rights up front, so we can try to actually do it, because we do have a sub rights agent, who, actually two of them. We have two sub rights agents who
okay.
work with OHB and who try to sell both audio and foreign editions. And on top of that, OHB actually has developed a really, really uh, tight relationship with, many of the audio companies, and we deal with them directly as well. So we do want to try to sell those rights, because we do have a really great opportunity to do that. But one of the ways that OHB wants to be different is, I designed OHB to be the publisher that I wish that I had all along. And, so yes, I think that those rights should be exploited for every book, but I can't necessarily put the ad dollars behind every book. So, if I at some point, I've had the book for a year, and my sub-right agents weren't able to actually sell it, and the author comes to me and say, "What can we do?" Well, there are a lot of things that we can do. First of all, you know, I'm totally open. We consider the authors very much as our partners. So I'm
Mhm.
totally open with them, just taking the audio rights and DIYing something on their own, if that's what they prefer. We also are just now starting. There are lots of things we're doing. Actually, we have so many irons in the fire, but we are actually starting an in-house foreign program,
Oh my
and
gosh.
also audio. And also, we have a Kickstarter arm where we're doing special editions through Kickstarter. So we have lots of irons in the fire. But, we are very much our authors' partners. So even for our new books authors, like if they came to me and they wanted to do, for example, animation or a comic book, and these are things that, we can't sell it, I'm absolutely 100% okay with giving them those rights back and letting them try, because why should anybody hold on to rights they're not exploiting? It's just not really, that's
I
not
mean, that's the question of the day. I have a couple authors right now I'm talking to, and I said, "Where are your audio rights?" And it's with some publisher that they signed with. They've never been exploited, but they don't legally have them.
right.
And so now we're just sort of exploring what the next step is, and if there's any clause about, if you haven't exploited it, then it reverts. But yeah, people need to be careful because you signed those things, and now you can't. But they sit on them.
Yeah, so absolutely. If there are so many books out there whose rights are just not being exploited, and not to point any fingers, and I'm not going to name any names, but the last 5 books of mine that I had with a publisher, it took me 15 years to get the print rights back to them. And they basically weren't doing anything with them. They were just sitting there, and I would ask periodically and ask and ask and ask. And finally they gave them back. Meanwhile, they're making, $10 on those books. And on the other hand, I'm making much, much more on the books that I'm promoting. And so eventually they had to give them back. But that is not, how I wanted to model OHB. We're a different animal, and a lot of times it's funny because we have relationships now with Library Journal and Goodreads, and I think it was Baker and Taylor that called me one day, and they were asking me about distribution. I kept tell them, we're just a little company, and no, I can't give you those kinds of percentages. And they were like, well, how many books do you manage? And they're like, I think at the time it was like 1,500. We have over 1,700 titles now.
Oh my.
Yeah, and with 12 to 16 brand new titles coming out every month. So yeah, we're doing some good stuff.
That is incredible. I mean, I'm just fascinated and in awe because are you also You're also publishing?
I'm writing less.
Less.
Yes, but I am still trying, and I'm actually trying to reposition my roles so that I can write a little more, because I didn't start this not to write.
I was going to say, how are you balancing that? Is that what is your ideal? So what is your ideal? What is your ideal scenario? What is your ideal day?
I don't have many of those because it includes writing for myself, and I almost never get that time. But my ideal day would obviously have mornings full of everything for the publishing company, just get all that out of the way so I don't have to think about it, and afternoons would be all about writing. And then I would quit at a reasonable hour and have a life outside of that, but it doesn't really seem to work out that way. But anyway, so back to what I was saying about the Baker and Taylor, when they called me and they were wanting to know about the distributions, and oh no, it wasn't that. It was actually Publishers Marketplace it was them that said it. So they were asking me over and over again whether we were a publishing house, or whether we were a partnership, because our website was worded really strangely, and they couldn't announce our deals without having a more traditional sort of setup for the publishing house. And so I kept saying, we are both their partners, and we're their publisher. There's no vanity press thing happening here. We pay for everything. Everything comes out of our share, and almost everything. There are a couple of pay share items that we share with the authors, but it's not a vanity press. It's not any of those things. But we are a publisher. We do all the things that a publisher does, but we also are those partners, very much so. So yeah, it's both. Anyway, so eventually I convinced them that that they should announce our books.
And do they? They do now, right?
They do. Yeah.
Good.
But they are
Yeah.
often very confused about how things work, because some of our authors are also editors with us. We're sort of a very, I hate to use the word ancestral, but kind of very much so. We take care of our own.
I love that because I find that this industry can be traditional, right? Like, these are the lines. This is how it works. You don't get to do that. Or no, if you don't get to weigh in on the cover, or you don't. It's so rigid sometimes, and it's changing, but I feel like it's changing very slowly. And so a concept like OHB is I can see how that's very foreign, because I think recently another publisher launched, and they're very much like a partnership too. And they're very operating a little differently, and it confuses people. I made a couple headlines because it's so confusing to the marketplaces to see them. Like, wait, so what are you? So is it a publishing house? So
Yeah.
what do you mean you're, and it's true that they also use the phrase like partnership. People don't understand what it means to be in an author partnership.
No, they don't. I mean, and that's essentially what it is that, as the publisher, I'm not asking for any money from them. We're footing the bill for everything. But our authors get to, they know their audience. We don't tell them what to write. They're not actually, once they're in like that core program, they're not even sending in submissions. We're there to actually support their decisions and guide, not guide, that's not really the word, once they're in that core program, we expect that they know their audience, they know what their audience wants next, and so they're driving not just their schedule, but their content. They're, they have say in their covers. It is very much a partnership, but we're still, we're footing the bill. We're paying them monthly. They get royalty statements. We're just, it's a, we're a publisher in every sense of the word. We're doing all the things that a publisher would do, but we are also their partners.
It's an incredible story, Like you said earlier, like I wanted to form the publishing house, so to speak, that I wish I had, right? And when you were not starting out in your career. And that's the revolution, right? That's like author saying, I don't like it, so what am I going to do about it?
Right. And I think that in part this probably, I have to give some kudos to my early indie career when I started out with do you remember the Jewels of Historical Romance? Yeah.
Can I just tell you how much I miss your chocolates? So I used to get a box from the Jewels of Historical Romance, and then I would get my refills.
That's funny.
Is it still around?
We are, but very loosely. Like it's just,
Okay.
but one of the things that came from that was that, um, you know, as you can imagine, in any group dynamic, everybody has their roles, and some people are, a million miles a minute, and ready for the next project, whatever. And I have to admit that was me. And Glynis Campbell, I think, would tell you that
Love Glennis.
there's this running joke about, if Tanya has an idea, you better not sit on your answer because it'll be over and done with by the time that you decide to respond, because I do move quickly. But one of the things that I learned, with this strong group of 12 women, was that there is strength in numbers, and that working together we're better. And so when OHB started to evolve into its role, and I actually had to at that point step back from the Jewels, because I just, I can't do everything. And I had to just, sort of cull what, my responsibilities a little bit. And so I sort of incorporated a lot of, what I learned with the Jewels, into OHB. And it has sort of come, all those things that I learned with the Jewels, the whole lifeboat, working together, all have sort of built themselves into OHB only times 10. So it's kind of so it's that times 10. The relationships we've built have enabled us to create relationships with, for example, Library Journal, and work more closely with, Ingram's and Amazon, and Audible, and all of the different ACX. It's enabled us to have more say, more meaningful relationships with those entities that are part of publishing. Very quickly, we all, sort of took on our roles and became valuable members in our own right, to the group. But it was absolutely Lauren Royal who had this vision.
I tell authors one of the biggest things you have to take advantage of is the community, the author community, especially in romance. It's just incredible. It's supportive. You're learning so much from each other, and you're so generous with your knowledge and your time. I mean, you did the ultimate thing with your knowledge. You created OHB to help over 100 authors, thrive out there. So I think that's wonderful. Well, there's a million more things I want to talk about, but I know we have to wrap this up. And maybe way down the line, we'll have a part 2. I do want to finish The Cornish Princess. I saw it was a series, and I was like, oh, I typically don't do a lot of series, but that's why I love Viking's Prize so much, because I was like, it's a one and done, and then I keep rereading it. But yeah, I would love to talk about that when I'm done with that series, because I find I would love to discuss with you, the writing style is very different than
It is very, very
it's very different. And I'm like, I'm so glad you provided a key with what the word, with what the terminology and some of the language in the beginning of the book.
So 2 things about that book, that series. it actually is based on a real life character who I came across in my research. She is, Gwendolyn of Cornwall was like, she's a little known character who, person who was basically Boudica before Boudica was Boudica. She was like, I don't put the timeline in the series mainly because I really very, very much turned it into it's fantasy, but it's not. It's historical fantasy. So I mean, there's a lot of it that has to be. I have to like that has to go along with what actually happened in her historical account. But it happened during it was like 1200 BC, so a long time ago. Yeah. So, but it's very much fantasy, and hopefully, you're not going to be mad at me at the end of the first book.
Uh-oh, I'm halfway done.
Yeah, because you'll understand why I say that when you finish the first book. But it is I started this series very much as it is a journey. And when she starts out in book one, it has YA feels, very much YA feels, and it sort of evolves from there. But it is if I had to cla- classify it, I would say, or categorize it, I would say that it is historical fantasy.
I
Um,
love it. I love it, and I accidentally clicked on the series page, and I saw the cover for book 2, and I immediately looked away, and I was like, "No, no, no. No, no, no. I need to finish book 1. I don't even wanna look at the cover because I don't want my mind to start guessing certain things." But I'm halfway done. I'm really excited to, like I said, the cover drew me immediately. Immediately. I think I first spotted it in your signature, in your email signature was the first time I saw it. I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is gorgeous. Is this the next one I'm adding?" And I bought it immediately. So I'm really excited. I thank you so much for having this conversation with me. You inspire me so much. Like I said, I'm trying to find my own footing, and as someone who's working full time, but also really dedicated to doing this. And some days I want to give up because it's like I would have so much more time for myself if I didn't do these things. But then when I'm in it, I'm so fulfilled.
Well, and don't give up because the thing is, there is if you're like me, which I think you are, I think that's why we click so much. But I feel like there's so much. I might be writing less. There are a lot of things that I wish I could change. I wish sometimes the market wasn't so difficult. I wish that things were just always perfect. But the truth is that it's not. And a lot of these people would be lost um, without some support, and that's kind of really what OHB is all about, and probably what you're doing as well. There's a lot of satisfaction to be had when there are successes. We just, for example, published. Do you remember Darcy Burke?
That name, it rings a
It
bell.
was a jewel also, but we just published her mystery. If you love historical mysteries, you absolutely have to go grab this new series of hers. But it has just been such a success, and it's wonderful when someone is stepping outside their normal genres or their comfort zones, and then you can be there to support them, and then bam, it's like fantastic, and it's working, and everybody's happy, and there's such excitement there. So yeah, it's
I
it's
love it.
rewarding.
Thank you so, so much, Tanya, for being here. And I will link all sorts of information in the show notes, including where are you most active? Are you most active on a particular social, or are you not on social? Like where do people go to find out, or is it signing up for your newsletter? Like where do people engage with you, the newsletter?
I have a really strong um, uh, Facebook author page, and so that would be the second best place.
Okay.
And I also have a readers group, but I very much uh, am on but I also have help posting there too. So it's not solely me on my author page, but for sure if they join my email on my newsletter, that's where it's all me 100% of the time.
Okay. I love that. I love that so much. Okay. Well, thank you again. And I will be finishing actually also, Tanya, I also have you sign this copy of The Girl Who Stayed also. So I have a lot of catching up to do. So maybe I'll be sending you some notes about what I think when I'm done.
Please do. And just so you know, even though I really love this series that I'm writing, The Girl Who Stayed is probably my favorite book ever that I wrote.
Oh, okay. So now you okay. So I'm immediately hopping on it. Thank you.
Very
Thank you
different
very
though.
much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks
no, I
for having
could tell. You know what's funny? I could tell immediately, right? Like just looking at it, you do such a great job visually of conveying what I'm in for almost. So I really appreciate that. Again, it's a full circle. It's your cover art genius.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you for having me, Nicole. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for joining me this week. For more information on today's episode, please check out the show notes. Before you go, make sure you subscribe to the podcast to receive new episodes right when they're released. You can subscribe right now in the app you're using to listen. And you can also follow me on Instagram at Reignite with Nicole. Lastly, I do have a quick favor to ask before we go. If you're enjoying the podcast, I hope you'll let me know by leaving a review. Thank you again for joining me in this episode of Writer Unblocked. I'll see you next time.